Be the Best You podcast. The sole purpose of this podcast is to teach, inspire, and motivate everyone to be the best versions of themselves. Welcome to the Be the Best You podcast. I'm your host, Larry Dawson. Today is going to be an amazing episode. I am extremely happy and honored to have Dr. John Nance on here today. I'm going to do a quick introduction, but I don't think I can do it justice, so I'll let him take over from there. I'm really honored to have you on. I'm really fascinated by you and who you are as a person, what you stand for, and the things you do. I feel the same way about Dr. Jordan Peterson, and I got you on now, and I plan on reaching out to him and one day soon, hopefully having him on as well. So your specialty is the brain, the mind, who we are, helping us overcome, helping us become the best versions of ourselves. And you are a doctor, you are a professor, you are a counselor, you're an author, you're a keynote speaker, you're an amazing human being. Thank you for coming on today. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you have going on.
Larry, thank you. It's an absolute privilege to be here with you, and I appreciate the invite.
Absolutely.
And, just to encapsulate it, I am a clinical mental health counselor, and I have a PhD in counseling education and supervision. And so my world is mental health and teaching future counselors and future teachers. And beyond that, I also do a lot of volunteer leadership work. And primarily right now, I'm the regional chair for the southern region of the American Counseling Association. And I've been the chair for the branches of South Carolina and North Carolina State Counseling Associations, pieces along that line. And then I do one national group is the Association of Adult Development and Aging as a division of the American Counseling Association. So I got a lot of stuff, that I love all the aspects of my profession, teaching, supervising, and practice.
Yes, sir.
And in my practice, I work primarily with adult survivors of early childhood trauma and catastrophic torture. And so individuals who experience symptoms of dissociative identity disorder, and it's formerly known as multiple personality disorder. So when we experience trauma early in life, the earliest years of life, severe traumas, a lot of times the personality will fragment. And so then it's a lifelong journey of trying to survive and in survival mode. So a lot there.
You know, I went through a lot of that myself. I mean, you talked about those things. But America itself is going through a lot. This country is in a major crisis right now. And a lot of the stuff that you deal with and help people with on a regular basis is what the majority of the country actually needs. Unfortunately, not enough people seek the mental treatment that they should get, or it's not accessible to them. But, you specializing in trauma, early age, and traumatic events. I remember, 4 years ago when UNCC had the shootings out there, and you helped with that as well. I read your resume. I know you on a personal level, but I read your resume last night, and I thought to myself, how could I even do him justice? All the presidents of the boards you've been on, the speaking, the writing, the counseling. I was like, this is one of the longest resumes I've ever seen. So really, it is an honor to have you on. And when I reached out to you about coming on, obviously this podcast is the Be the Best You podcast. So every episode is about how we can become better versions of ourselves. This right here is a nationwide announcement to everybody. The gentleman that you have on is an expert in this field, and I'm about to ask him questions that was given to me by some of you. Some of them I came up with myself, but these are very serious and deep questions and real questions that we have an absolute expert on today to answer these questions. So I hope you guys really enjoyed today's episode, but we're gonna go ahead and dive on in. What do you think about that?
Sounds great.
All right, so let's start with the first one, man. I think one of the most overlooked aspects of what is going on in our country is that we are dealing with a major mental health crisis. What is your opinion on that? And what ideas do you have that can help fix the issues?
Well, that's going to take about 3 hours.
Well, we got all day.
Right. That is a that is such an in-depth question because I come from different areas of expertise and research within mental health. And as we look at our nation over the last 3 years, we've got to look at it in so many different ways of impact on mental health. We know the pandemic has been a global crisis. It's had global impacts, and it has many impacts with our mental health across our nation. We also know that the political climate in the United States is polarized to a place where you're either or. And that in itself is a cognitive distortion.
Yes, it is.
We can be both and.
Yes,
Right?
absolutely. But if you take a stance against one or the other, you're automatically labeled the other, or a racist, or this or that or whatever. And it's crazy to me. Why does everything have to be so black and white when the whole world could be gray if we wanted it to be? But they try to force you to take these sides. It's like divide and conquer. If we keep them divided, we can control them and conquer them.
It is very much about votes. People need jobs. Politicians need to stay in their jobs. I mean, that's their whole goal. In many ways, obviously there's going to be a whole other reason they are in the position, but they need votes. And so the polarization is the tool to keep people angry with each other, to keep people focused on a policy, on a position, when that position has 1,000 options within it. And so that is another area that we are being manipulated in many ways. And I also am very passionate in politics. I'm very passionate about my perspectives, but I've also had to step back away from it a little bit. And then another area that I've been focusing on quite a lot is marginalization, looking at those individuals and groups of people who are systematically in a place of inferiority, in a place of keeping power at the minimum. And so I think of my friends of color that have got to strive twice as hard as others to get into roles that they are in, and that exhaustion. And so then also the political climate adding to that, the impacts of the pandemic on marginalized groups and jobs and job security. There are so many impacts right now happening across the United States. And I also believe the isolation of the pandemic created another group to be focused on social media. I maybe on thin ice here, I don't know, as I talk about that, but
speak freely.
It really has caused us to look at self and healing of self, and I think to the detriment of relationships. So I'm just kind of thinking out loud here a little bit, but that was one thing that came through my mind this morning early, is so often we are encouraged to get out of toxic relationships, leave the job if it's not ideal, or if you don't feel right in it, and to what detriment? As I look at myself aging, I also wonder sometimes about what is wisdom. Wisdom comes with age, and working through difficult situations wisdom is a product of that.
Yeah.
So I struggle in those areas. So there's so much going on in our nation right now. And
I want to piggyback off something
Yeah.
you said really quickly when you said people are taught to leave a relationship very quickly, or leave a job very quickly, or leave things very quickly when there's resistance or when things aren't ideal or perfect. And I had a very deep conversation with two gentlemen early this morning that I really like and respect. And I watched a video last night of a student beating up a teacher in school, and I was watching the comments on it because there's no disciplines in the home anymore these days. You just let kids kind of do whatever. And, I'm not here to tell anybody how to raise their kids, but I am here to say that I feel like part of the problem in America is what's going on with the youth. How they have access to the World Wide Web at a too young of an age, and it's twisting their minds. How these participation trophies are not good for anyone. You need to learn what it's like to not win and to strive harder. And you know what? I didn't get it this time, but I'm going to work harder and I'm going to come back better. And not discipline in any of these kids in the homes. There needs to be discipline and structure and respect. Because if you don't have discipline, structure, and respect, and then you get released into the world and you are put in these situations, you have no discipline, respect, or structure. So when something doesn't go your way, you act out, you quit a job, you show your butt, you start a fight in public, you throw a tantrum. This can't sustain like this.
And I would agree with that. And we also have to look at the family systems of the parent of one, where they have to work not only just one job and raise children, but they have to have 2 and 3 jobs and raise children, and try to figure out how to do that, and what does that system look like. And so we're again talking right there around either marginalization or socioeconomic status that impacts what you're saying. And then the pandemic hit that square in, where we had our entire nation of students working from home, and I'm going to put working in air quotes because
Where are they really working?
so many didn't even sign in. I've been working with a county in the area with a middle school, and working with trauma-informed classroom management. And a good number of the faculty have really bought into the idea that we are working with an entire group of traumatized individuals. Others aren't buying into it. They need to toe the line. And creating they must toe the line almost creates a hypothetical hypothetical captivity for students who have been on their own free for 3 years. And now we're expecting them, you must toe the line. That's going to create tension. That's going to create pushback. I know we're bouncing a little bit here, but
we're still on the mental health crisis,
Yeah.
so we're still on it.
Yeah,
Because this is all part of it.
it is, and there's no simple answer, absolutely no simple answer, other than to look at our nation as a large group of people that need to get along somehow, right? And I know some of the questions later we're going to be talking around this a little bit, is how do we sit in those difficult places with each other and grow from them?
So you're a very smart man, a very educated man. So when you speak, you're speaking from a very intelligent place. I'm going to just throw something out there at you. I'm going to see your opinion on this. That, there's theories out there. There's a system that kind of controls everything, right? So this system gives us racism to fight about. Get the shot or not get the shot. Democrat versus Republican. Samsung versus iPhone. It gives you these black and white picks. You pick this side or you pick this side. You pick this side or you pick this side. You pick this side or you pick this side. As long as a system, if that's the case, is really in place, and they give us issues to keep us fighting and distracted and not see the bigger picture of the separation that is growing between the haves and the have-nots and the uber wealthy and everyone else, as long as that continues to happen and they continue to make those moves while the rest of us fight over these other things that they give us to fight about, how do you see that playing out?
I'm going to backtrack a little bit. I don't know that I believe in a system manipulating it. I believe that's human nature. I think across history, we have seen this system play out. We have seen power and control play out. And I was taught sociology in undergrad from a perspective of gaining the fear of loss of power and control, or the striving for power and control. And that is kind of a base in human existence and need, perceived need. there's a large portion of, of group thinking that is taking place, that first of all, that we are threatened. And I'm speaking kind of from a majority perspective, that there's a perceived threat that isn't real. That the loss of being majority,
Fear, false evidence appearing real.
yes, is problematic when it is nowhere in the nearest future. But it keeps us marginalizing groups.
What you said reminds me of a book I read called All Roads Lead to Rome.
Mm.
And it shows how every single parliament, government, dictatorship, whatever socialism, government, whatever you have in place, it shows how there's a faction of it that all came from Rome. And it shows how like that power structure of controlling the masses has been used since then in each different country and power and kingdom has used that in a different type of way to basically give the illusion that the power is in the people, but ultimately the power is in the government or the structure or whatever, which probably is where the fear comes from, because that's how a small amount of people can keep a massive amount of people in line.
Absolutely. We have watched that take place in different countries, different times. In the U.S., we've watched it in a couple different eras where nationalism, the fear of our borders being, compromised, and we are going to be invaded by whatever and whoever, or that we already have been invaded and we must squelch whatever and whoever that is. We watched that take place where it is a manipulation. It is a manipulation based in fear, and therefore we need an enemy. And it shifts from the borders to internal, and that's where we've watched it happen over the last 6 years. We've watched and I'm air quoting all of this because I don't necessarily believe in the enemy, right?
Yeah.
Is that for years we had the enemy at the borders, and that conversation and that fear is back. But there was the focus, there's a word that's not in my mind right now, but there was a focus on our own. That's where the political parties became enemies. And it was even verbalized that they're a threat to us. And so 50%, whatever our percentages are, become our enemy. And that's the manipulation. It's a political manipulation. It is a power manipulation. I have a family member, my brother and I, we work very hard at this because we are very different in our perspectives. Mm-hmm. We can get red-faced with each other. You know?
No, not a family doing that.
Oh, we try to stay out of it. We really do. And what we do, though, do very well is we have a default. We know we love each other. And in that default, we will always go back there. We will take the time. We got to separate right now. We've got to stop this conversation. Yeah. I want you to know I love you. Yeah. I think that is core to healing, no matter what. I think we must, in all of our mental health conversations, in all of the conversations around power and control, and wherever we go with this, I think empathy for other is critical. You know,
Absolutely.
You and I, in preparation for this, talked about the wellness,
yeah.
and a wellness model. We'll get there later. To be well is relational, right?
Yeah.
We've got to keep our relationships in mind, and I think we also have to be emotionally intelligent. If I find myself feeling threatened, I've got to figure out what about this is mine. What do I need to look at? And how do I wrestle with these things internally first, and then I can work externally. So that's what my brother and I do well.
That's actually very intelligent because I would say, I don't want to put a fake number out there, but I would say probably 90% of people do the opposite. They look or outward before they look within, and try to blame everybody else. What is this person doing? What is that person doing? What is this person? Instead of saying, well, what can I do better? What am I doing wrong?
Let me jump on really thin ice here.
Yeah.
I'm a spiritual person,
Mhm.
but so often individuals use the group think of spirituality
Mhm.
to weaponize and to keep
Yeah.
that power focus
Mhm.
for fear of being influenced negatively, for fear of loss of power, for fear of if I take that belief in, then my entire belief set shatters.
Yeah.
And it's right there. It's looking externally and also blaming even higher power sometimes for those things that we could be working on.
I had a conversation with a gentleman on Saturday. I went and had lunch with him in Uptown. A very good man that I have a lot of respect for. And he was saying a lot of kind things to me. He was trying to put me on a pedestal. And I said, don't do that, man. I said, don't put me on a pedestal. I said, in my opinion, I think what separates me from other people is I have this unique ability within myself to challenge myself on an everyday basis and look inside myself and say, what can I do better? And I challenge myself to do better every single day. And I push myself really, really hard to be a better human being every single day. And I know most people don't do that. So I was telling him, stop putting me on a pedestal. In my personal opinion, that's the only thing that separates me from other people, is I just have this unique ability to look within and to really push myself and not look at others, but look at me and say, how can I be better? And I push myself to do better. And as I become better, then I push others to do better. But that's really the ultimate key to the secret.
Well, and Larry, if I know you, you also look to other people to say, what do I need to do better for you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's critical. If I am offensive to somebody, I'm going to evaluate it internally. I'm going to also check in either with them or with people around me to see how accurate it is. Do I need to shift? Do I need to adjust somehow?
Because you won't be able to truly help someone. First of all, sometimes you can see your flaws in by how you deal with others, or maybe you're rubbing a group of people the wrong way and with your stance on something, and maybe you need to reevaluate that. And if the ultimate goal, and my ultimate goal is that I want to help people, influence people, push people, motivate people, inspire people, and I want them to be better versions of themselves, whether it's in their work or their personal life or their fitness or just their overall mental well-being. If I'm trying to push these people to be better people and better versions of themselves, then I need to know, how can I help you? What are your pitfalls? What are your strengths? What's really going to motivate you? What do I need to work on to get you right? So you're absolutely right about that. I do that. That's one of
Well, and here's something I do when I teach, and you come from a physical fitness kind of originally perspective, and I'm also then this emotional perspective.
Yes, sir.
Where I tell students, I'm like, until we sit with individuals in the mud field, where they could stand up and walk out on their own, but they don't either know how, don't know they can, or don't want to.
Yeah.
If we can't go sit with them and either push them out, and motivate them and push them out, or lift them up, pull them out, then we need to sit down and throw mud with them.
Yeah, and I know you know this about me, and people that are watching and listening have heard this before, but I believe in the trifecta, and I believe that you cannot be complete and healthy without the trifecta. You have to have your spirit energy right, you have to have your mental right, and you have to have your physical right. Because if any of those three are off, your balance is going to be off and you will not be complete.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as we practiced and talked, I also teach from a wellness model. And so those three are kind of these pivotal places, and then add about 6 more,
Yes,
where
sir.
we've got career, we've got family, we've got emotional emotional stability. I always forget all nine. One of them's creativity.
Mhm.
Um, all of these areas, if you Google wellness model, it's going to be all over the place. All these areas in balance are the desire. If we are not able to keep those in balance, or if something's out of whack, that's where we start to pull in and work to see, okay, do you want to address that? Do you not want to address that? Through all of this and all the pandemic, there have been so many things that have not been in place, not been addressed. For 3 years, I've been putting on weight. You know, not knowing how to not do it. You had mentioned the shooting on campus.
Mhm.
I was on campus for that shooting, and I see that now as a pivoting moment of life for me, and my in some ways decline in mental health, physical health, and then my professional well-being was off the charts because of all the things that were being demanded of me at the time of lockdown and the pandemic.
Mm.
But that's a place where I started to pivot and spiral a bit, because I also lost my dad. I had other losses in life. There are major things that took place during that time, and in that area, all areas of wellness became imbalanced.
Mm.
And I've had to do a lot of recovery from that.
First off, I'm very sorry about your father. Obviously, I lost my mother a few years ago as well. We had discussed that. But one thing you did just bring up is part of this first question that I wanted to really touch on. And I know we've discussed a lot on this first question, but you mentioned the shooting at UNCC, and you was there. You had to deal with that and then help those people afterwards. But there is a massive crisis in our country with these shootings. So I looked up the definition of what is considered a mass shooting in America. So you can go somewhere and you can do a drive-by and you can shoot and 20 people can get hit and only 2 people die. That's not considered a mass shooting. For it to be considered a mass shooting, 4 people have to die. So that's what they consider a mass shooting in America. In the calendar year of 2022, there was 647. Let me repeat that. 647 mass shootings where at minimum 4 people died. This is unheard of. This is insane. Today is the 31st of January of 2023. There has been 40 so far already this month in America. Now, once again, this is not a shooting. This isn't a gang violence shooting where there's going by and areas getting sprayed up and 2 people are dying. Those do not count as mass shootings. 4 individuals will have to die for it to be considered a mass shooting. You was at UNCC when something like this happened, and you said that was a pivotal moment where, it started to make you unbalanced a little bit, along with some other stuff you had going on. That is part of what I consider when I talked about the mental health crisis in America. And when I mentioned we're not raising people to have discipline and respect and structure, they don't know what it's like to be told no, they don't know what it's like to not come in first place or not get a trophy, they don't know what it's like to not get their way. There is a disservice going on, and when people are rejected, they can't handle it these days. And I just really want to know your opinion about all this. Where are you stand on all this?
First thing comes in, that is a really conservative perspective of mass shooting, and those are huge numbers.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that down to 2 dead,
Yeah, it would probably triple that.
It's off the charts.
Yeah.
It's insane. We do have and we absolutely have a problem in the U.S. that doesn't exist in some other developed countries. Period.
Yeah.
Then I start to also think about something we teach in mental health and in counseling is group process. So we have a specific class on group counseling. And I went through the program. We had 2 courses on group counseling. And you know that in every group, to be effective, you're going to be forming, just sort of like what we're doing in the room. We're kind of talking, getting to know each other, getting to know opinions. Then we're going to probably at some point start to disagree. And then we're going to storm. And that's the blow up in a group. But a good group facilitator is going to bring that storm into a process of dialogue and working toward a resolution in dialogue, not necessarily agreement, but a place then of working. And it's just like a marriage. If you can argue effectively in a marriage more frequently without intentionally hurting each other, your marriage is going to be much stronger. In any group, storming is necessary for a working and functioning group. And I think we've got to work in that kind of mindset throughout our country, whatever that would be. One of the individuals that was instrumental in counseling and psychology through the, I think, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s was Carl Rogers. And he talked about empathy, unconditional positive regard. He was instrumental in working in the reconciliation conversations in South Africa and also in Ireland. I think we are at I hope we're at a place in our nation where that could be something that would be beneficial. I hope we don't have to get to a place where we have to have more greater and grand tragedy and crisis. I hope we've got to this place of a boiling point.
Like, you mean what's going on in our country right now, where we have riots this entire weekend all across the major cities in America?
Let me just say, I would say protests.
Well, okay, you're right.
Yeah.
I would say protests too, because it's been directed at one particular group of people. It's been directed basically at police officers. Rightfully so, because it's getting ridiculous. And you know, I, in my past, was a form of abuse by officers.
Mm-hmm.
I've been assaulted by officers. Now, first of all, let me say this. When I was younger, I lived a life where I brought some things on myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I deserved the things that I got as far as the time I got sentenced to and the time that I did. But I also was physically assaulted on several different occasions by some cops. One time by 5 cops with nightsticks. Another time I had another officer plant marijuana on me and arrest me for it. And one place that I served at and was around the sheriff and a bunch of his deputies and his major and his little narcotics team, being on the inside where I was at, I could see the corruption, and it was mind-boggling to me that they were able to get away with the corruption that they were. It was almost like there was a gang. This sheriff had rape charges brought against him, corruption, all kinds of different charges. He kept, like Teflon Don, just kept bouncing off of him. One of his main detectives actually planted some stuff on my friend and got charges brought against him. Well, come to find out, he ended up finally getting arrested. That whole crew got arrested. They're all in federal prison right now for assault, falsifying documents, money laundering, a laundry list of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I understand the protests that are going on against cops in this country. So I don't know what the ultimate answer is going to be with that. Because just like in every job, there's good people and there's bad people. In every job, in every walk of life. The problem is that system.
In also mental health.
Yeah.
Go back to, you've got a group of individuals in a system that go toward the trauma.
Mm-hmm.
They're paid for addressing traumatic experiences. And other things.
Mm-hmm.
How are they processing their own trauma? And there is a large movement toward mental health in the first responders, in the world of first responders. So it's about mental health of theirs, and also then there are those that are traveling with first responders in looking at mental health of those that they serve. I think that needs to be increased across all and greater. As you described your situation, the system eventually worked, but it was too late. And why did the system not work sooner? I think understanding, I don't know what the answer is to it, but I think understanding mental capacity, trauma history of officers, of those candidates wanting to become officers, I think those pieces are incredibly important.
I think maybe we should start with an oversight committee that basically keeps an eye on elected officials, sheriffs, and chiefs, deputies, officers, and make sure that what's supposed to be going on is really what's going on.
And we're talking power and control,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're talking an abuse of power, and the abuse of power in order to keep others in control. I do
Yeah.
live with an entire kind of framework of watching power and control and how it is carried out. Now, I'm going to tangent just a moment.
Okay.
I've got to do a keynote in a month, and it's students in media. And one of the things that I noticed over this last week in the media, we've had 5 officers arrested and charged with manslaughter?
Second-degree murder.
Murder. I wonder if we would have, if race were of consideration of the officers, would it have been as quickly decided? Would the tapes have been released as quickly? I know I'm stirring up stuff right there, and that may be for a whole different day.
Yeah.
But I watch things like that because race does play so much into these things. And part of my work in the history has been mass incarceration. We have mental health problems, but we also have to address how our systems are creating some of it and continue some of it. I believe most officers are legit. I believe most officers are excellent in what they do.
Yeah.
There are so many, and I have been abused in 2 situations by police officers. I believe that there are those in every system, and it's about how do we keep accountability.
So I believe in the good of humanity, right? But unfortunately, because of my dealings back then, and then being away and being around them for so long, I saw so many things up close and personal. Especially even getting a job where I worked when I was at the detention center. My job was to leave the detention center and go work at the sheriff's department for years, and to see behind the scenes what was really going on.
I'm imagining there are times you did not feel like a human being to them.
It depended on who. So it depended on who was in office. I watched 3 different sheriffs come and go. So I've seen a lot of different officers, and it's funny to me because even some of the ones that acted funny towards me now will send me messages on social media. Man, I watched one of your speeches, or I heard your podcast, or hey man, is one of your condos available? I'd like to rent it. Whatever it may be, trying to be friendly with me now and everything. And oh my God, you're doing so amazing in life. They're still doing the same thing. And we're all supposed to continuously evolve and grow. But then watching the ones that have gotten in trouble over and over and over and over and over again. There was a guy, I'm going to give him a shout out. His name is Robert Coffin. He was the number 2 person. You have the sheriff and you have the chief deputy. He was the chief deputy. And my mother came to visit me one day, and he came up while I was on visitation with my mother, and he said, hey, I just want to introduce myself, and gave my mom a hug, and he said, your son is one of the best men I've ever met in my life. And he said, we all did things when we were younger that could have got us in trouble. I just happened to not get caught for any of the stuff I did. So there's good people. So and there are plenty of other great people. Shout out to T. Neal, just got promoted to be the director of the Chester County Detention Center. You're an awesome girl. I'm proud of you. Keep being great. So there are really good people out there, right? But I've seen so much bad and so much corruption, and that group of individuals, those 5 guys, they were part of a special task force. And what I have noticed is what those special task force is, they have a lot more leeway and a lot of opportunity to do stuff they shouldn't be doing. And when I watched those videos, that was a gang-like attack, and they beat that man like a gang. And I don't know those men, but I grew up in the streets. I did time, and I lived that type of lifestyle. And even though that's not my life, it hasn't been my life for a long time, it doesn't mean that I forgot any of that. When I watched those videos, I saw a gang. And I would be willing to bet my right arm that special task force and those men, they do that type of stuff. That's how they look at themselves. That's their mentality. That's the way they carry themselves. And they just executed it. Happened to be on camera this time and got caught and went a little bit too far.
So let's go, I'm gonna jump to another question I think that we're probably gonna be fielding is one of those is the connection between mind and body. You know, when I see that, I see people, I see men reacting, men in their emotional state and not their thinking state. It's problematic. That is the lack of emotional intelligence. That is the lack of self-control. That's the lack of individual thought process. That is groupthink or group being that does not involve logical processing. That is empathic, emotionally attached to the world around them. Mm-hmm. I think that's where I go with that, and they're conditioned in that.
Well, I read this morning that the reason that happened is. Did you see what you?
I did not.
So one of the officers, his girlfriend, left him and started dating that boy. That boy put a hit out on him. That cop put a hit out on that boy, and that was the hit executed. So that's what I read this morning, and that is absolutely terrible. It goes back to what my initial thought was when I saw the video. That is a gang hit. And when I read that to myself, I literally was like, that just confirms what I saw with my own eyes, because that wasn't random, and that was brutal. And I don't know how true that story is. I'll have to read and dig a little bit more because it was breaking news, and sometimes you don't know. Sometimes it comes back later, and so I'm just going by what I read this morning. It said that after he did it, he took pictures and sent them to the ex-girlfriend and said, "How do you like him now?" So if all that's true, that's premeditated. That's using your position and your gang of friends to do what you want. It's pathetic, and there needs to be an oversight committee, and something needs to be done about it.
Well, I would like to know the authenticity of that also.
So would I.
And because I come at that in a racial perspective of, would that be said the same if the cops were a different race? Mm-hmm. Is that to undermine in some way and use that situation to remove other situations similar to it? You know, I'll be looking forward to looking, not forward, but to learning some of those details.
So you touched on one of the things a second ago that I wanted to touch on when you said the mental health of first responders. So one of the questions I have is actually from a nurse that works in the trauma center at the hospital, and she has watched a lot of terrible things, and people dying and a lot of other stuff. And this was a question that I wanted to ask you from her, and it is, we depend on our health experts to help us, but with low staff, overpopulation, and being overworked, who is going to help them deal with the stress and trauma that they are going through?
That is a great question. I worked in one of the major hospital systems here in the area for 12 years in the chaplaincy services office, and as a counseling and chaplain intern coordinator and supervisor. And in that system, it is so often left up to the individual off the clock to take care of themselves, or not take care of themselves. And I would say that the same way with first responders, is the systems fail the individuals that they use to treat. you know, the nurses, the doctors, the fire department, police officers and sheriffs. So often the individuals are required to restore for the next shift, and it's not in the best way. Whatever they do to cope, it's left to them. So mental health is an absolute necessity. How do we convince individuals that they're tired and that they need to attend to their own mental health?
When they're already exhausted.
wellness?
Now you need to go to a therapist or a psychologist. Yeah.
Right, they're doing overtime, they're doing more than. And in this pandemic, as a mental health provider, I'm going through the same, hopefully, I'm going through the same shit as everybody else. And I'm having to sit and bracket and contain my own stuff while I'm sitting with somebody and I'm over-identifying with what they're going through. And having clients die as a result of COVID, and having supervisees whose clients have killed themselves. And so life is happening to me at the same time it's happening to others, and how do we bracket that? So I think nurses are an example. They have to go toward it, do it, and do their jobs that are being demanded of them. But then how do they step away from that, open up what they've boxed up, deal with that, and restore? I think that's the biggest word that comes in, is restoration and healing.
You're the health expert, so your advice to them is going to be a lot more important than mine. My advice in that situation would be to make sure you take care of yourself. Make sure that your body is good. Make sure you're working out and eating healthy and you're not putting bad liquids in your body. Make sure that your mental's okay. If you need to see a counselor, a therapist, a psychologist, then take that step. And to make sure like your energy's right. Make sure you have the right people around you, your mindset is right, that you're doing things, that you're de-stressing, going for a walk, meditating, going to the beach, taking a vacation, spending some time with some family. Make sure that your life becomes healthy and that the job doesn't overwhelm you and beat you down to the point where you start to lose it.
And I think just trying to be aware of when you're not there. In any one of those areas that you describe, if you're not 100% in it, if you're not 40% in it, sometimes just being okay in not being okay. I've learned also that just the acknowledgement that I'm not all right now is enough.
Yeah, because at least you acknowledge. So now, if someone's close to you, like, what the hell's going on with John? Or what the hell's going on with Larry? Like, I'm not in the best space right now. I'm dealing with someone died that I know, or so forth or so on.
Real quick on that, I was not successful in all my leadership roles during the last 3 years, at least in my perspective, in my ideals. But then I had feedback from others that it was a good year. Well, cool, but it certainly was not what I anticipated.
It's because you was feeling it on the inside, so you didn't think it came out right. I do that a lot.
And that's one of the things I've had to deal with in my own mental health, are the ideals. Is it okay that I slept till 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning? Well, that's late for me. Yes, it's okay. Is it okay I did not run and maybe even gained a couple weeks over the weekend? Yes, but how am I going to restore? How am I going to not let that be my trajectory if I don't want that?
How do you stop the snowball effect? I always tell someone, that, real quickly, not to go off target, but someone will be like, man, I ate bad that morning, and so I said to hell with it, I ate bad for lunch and dinner. What? That's just, I don't even understand that mentality. If you realized you ate a bad meal, you should be like, all right, well, I messed up, so I'm gonna eat a salad for lunch. Not, I'm just gonna keep adding to it. I'm gonna keep, so.
Was that me that talked to you? I don't remember.
So really quickly, I have 4 nurses that are friends. And 2 of those 4 nurses have made very similar comments to me recently that they hope and pray to God that a loved one of theirs does not have to go to the hospitals, because the hospital systems are a complete disaster, and they're scared that their loved ones will die if they'll go, because people in there just don't care, and they watch mistakes happen on a daily basis, and they watch people lose their lives that have no business losing their lives. Look, that's such a terrible statement. We depend on the Western medical healthcare system to save us, not kill us.
Well, and it is struggling without question. And one of those, I go back to the 15 cognitive distortions, is that nothing is working right. Okay? There are some things working right because they work there. We know that their work is quality work. At least we hope that, right?
We hope.
And we also know that hospital systems do harm people and kill people unintentionally. Hopefully, they do it less today than they did the day before. I believe that there are quality healthcare providers. We also know that nothing's perfect. Knowing the system, we know that there are patient advocates. We know, my dad died in the hospital in 2019, and he should not have died that night. And that's a struggle. That is a struggle. But I also believe in systems they want to improve. I don't think it's all bad. There are bad parts of it. Just the same as we talked about the police force and sheriff's officers. They're not all bad. There are bad parts.
Yeah.
Right?
All right, so I'm going to move on to the next question. In your professional opinion, how much does childhood trauma affect your mental and physical health as an adult? And what would a path to healing from look like?
Great question. There's a lot of research out there, and there's one specific research publication, and it's been replicated over and over, and it's called the ACEs study.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about this.
Yeah, the ACEs is the Adverse Childhood Event Scale. There's 10 questions in that scale, and it is administered to adults, and it asks about childhood family dynamics in the home. Have you ever experienced a caregiver or a parent throwing, hitting, slapping, different pieces, and there's 10 questions. And if you answer yes on any of those, and a number of those, with each answer yes, the higher the likelihood of adverse outcomes in adulthood. And we're talking not only mental health, we're talking physical health, we're talking addiction, blood pressure, weight, heart disease. We're talking huge impact across life from adverse childhood traumas. And so it has been shown over and over again that there is negative outcome. So that question is so complex. It's what I do in my practice is I'm working with individuals either struggling with life in such extreme struggles based upon their trauma history without understanding the impact of that history, or those who have said, I've had this trauma in my childhood I need to deal with. There are many people who put it away and never pull it back out, but it is going to take its toll.
Yeah, it does.
It's not if, it's when it does. There's a book out there by Bessel van der Kolk, and it's called The Body Keeps the Score. And it's widely known among mental health practitioners that our bodies do hold trauma. And in our brains, our bodies hold trauma, and we react to trauma. We react to triggers. And we may even react the same way we might have in the first time we were traumatized.
So this question actually came from my wife. I mean, you talked about this, about my wife being very well read and studying on a regular basis. And so my wife is she's an introvert. And not even her family really knows her like that. I know her like that. I see the real side of her. She just will not show her personality fully to everybody like that. And so it's funny sometimes when people talk and they say things, people want to come back at you with their opinion. She reads and studies a lot, almost like that I did when I was gone. So she reads it. Like one of the things that she's reading is these books about how childhood trauma changes so much stuff about you, not just mentally and how you hold on to it and affects your personality and things you do with your life, but how you can have intestines and digestive issues. You can have high blood pressure. You can have weight issues, heart issues, all these things based off of trauma. And this is not opinions.
Right.
These are facts. But it's crazy because you can hear someone that's intelligent, like my wife, that reads this stuff, that are, documented facts by doctor after doctor after study, and then you might tell someone, and like, oh, well, no, it's the truth, it's facts. So, she's reading about this, and she knew you was coming on. I told you she was super excited that you was coming on. She really respects you and has a very high regard for you. She wanted me to ask you that question, and she wanted an inside depth breakdown. And I think that she gets to see me, and she gets to see how successful I've been with overcoming all that stuff. And when you see me and the way my life is, you've said a lot of kind things to me about the way that I've handled it and put it past me and moved on. It's kind of skewed her look, because if you see someone that's had not one but 10 different ones, I'm just making up a number, happen to them, and they're able to overcome it and be so strong and help and guide and lead other people, how is it that some people that have one or two or three struggle for their entire lives? So I think that she really wanted an in-depth breakdown by you, an analysis of why it is such a struggle for others than it is, for people like me, like-minded people.
We talk about resilience also, in the studies around trauma and childhood trauma and what gets some through. And I never really label what a traumatic event is for somebody. It's really about how they experience the moment.
Because we all experience moments in different ways, right?
Absolutely. We all could witness a traffic accident on the same corner and label it differently for ourselves in the way we experience it. And so an individual's makeup, there are words that are escaping me in the moment, disposition, may focus more on the threat of it, and others may see like, I wasn't hurt, I'm fine. So resilience, if somebody does experience trauma, is what does it take then to move from that moment and heal from the moment? That is an area of, we can't determine for each individual what that is, but the individual themselves has got to figure those pieces out. We do know that in childhood, the earlier in life the trauma happens has negative impact. We know the frequency of the trauma. We know the type of trauma, whether it is physical, sexual, witnessing of violence, whatever those traumas are, those impact. And then we also know that the familiarity of the individual who traumatizes to the person or child being traumatized, we know that plays also into impact. So there are a lot of impactful pieces and dynamics and variables in the childhood experience that may impact also. Even I think you and I both know in our own histories that there are things that trigger us to get our minds spinning. And that would be a residual of, a potential residual of traumatic impact. And how do you and I identify those moments of triggering, and how do we then either consciously or unconsciously mend in that current time frame, in that current moment? our brains have memories that are pretty amazing. We are designed for survival.
One thing that I have learned studying, and me and my wife talk about this quite a bit, is that when you start thinking about something that happened and an emotion, your body doesn't know if that's happening right now or if that happened 10 years ago. So as you're playing this memory out in your mind, your body starts to feel the emotion of it because your body has no conscious of time. It doesn't understand that that memory is from 10 years ago or if it's happening right now. So your body starts to relive that trauma because of your mind thinking about it.
In your mind, the chemistry of the brain with adrenaline, we react. You know, if you go to a sports club and you have 20 televisions around you, you're continuously scoping the area because there's movement in your peripheral.
Yeah.
That is our designed assessment of threat.
Yeah.
Within our bodies, okay? You're looking over there to see what's happening over there. That, for some, is hypervigilance. For others, it's just instinctual. We look, it's not a problem. If we have those triggers, and I'll even take it out of the room where you hear of somebody, yeah, he threw a vase against the wall, or whatever the argument was. We talk about age of traumatization. That time frame when trauma happened in our lives that we revert to. At what age do we learn not to throw things? Okay?
Right.
It's usually young, but there are those who were traumatized at that time by either something being thrown at them or whatever and not learning.
And now they're throwing bullets into crowds and killing multiple people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So whenever I hear of violence like that or experiences like that, I start to wonder what happened back when, right?
Yeah.
And so I think of age of traumatization. That's one of the phrases that we use in trauma work also, is what happened back there. And it's a stuntedness, you know, that may take place, an emotional stuntedness and very unconscious.
Yeah.
That if you can bring that awareness and then bring the trauma out of the experiencing brain, the emotional brain, and into a prefrontal cortex, okay, into our logic and wisdom in our narrative, and bring it to a story. Yeah, this happened, whatever, and however they would develop that for their own story and healing. That's the work of the trauma.
And when and people tend to disassociate when they go through these traumas. So if you're going through traumas at a young age, I don't care if you're 5, 10, or 15, and you start to disassociate, and this becomes a pattern of yours, it stunts your development and your growth and your maturity. That's why sometimes you see people that are 30 that are childlike because they haven't fully developed because they disassociated too much because of this trauma. I try to talk to people and counsel people about that and being aware of that. But you had talked about disassociation earlier, so I wanted to touch on that.
Yeah, and that's something that that is very much a part, and we all do it. We all, when you are brushing your teeth in the morning and you are arguing with somebody outside the room, you have dissociated in some form or fashion.
Are you winning the argument when you're brushing your teeth?
Right. And you know, and children do it all the time, where they put a cape on and they are somebody else. But at some point, if there's trauma involved, it is not a healthy dissociation, right? And we work to stay grounded, stay mindful in the moment, and find those triggers and to figure out what our responses are to the triggers.
So then this is going to be a tie-in from that, and it is, could you please explain why you can never heal from trauma by holding it in and acting like it doesn't exist? Also explain the steps that it takes for healing to actually happen so you can live a healthy and normal life.
Okay, and that's sort of, I was alluding to the work of the brain. I am not a neuroscientist by any means. I talk very simply about the brain, and there are 3 phobias often with trauma and experiencing trauma in those who are either unrecovered memories or those who remember it but don't want to say it. There's a fear of remembering things because can I handle these memories? there's a fear of telling about those things because can the people around me handle that? And then the third phobia is the phobia of healing. It's not that individuals don't want to, but what if you live a life of trauma?
Addicted to the feelings.
And addicted to the feelings, but also hypervigilant, protecting oneself and making sure there's no threat nearby. If I've always been that way, I have no idea what calm feels like, and it certainly doesn't feel right.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, because we're creatures of habits.
Yeah, and I've got to be on guard because I will be hurt. Right? So those three phobias for me are incredibly important when I think about when we keep it encapsulated, when we keep our trauma history unknown, it can have negative impact. For some, they go through life without needing to remember, right? And when I work with those who are severely traumatized, it's one of those that, do we really need to remember this? I'm not one that says, yes, we've got to uncover it all and expose it all. I don't believe that necessarily is helpful.
Well, it's because everybody's different.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's the person that it happened to me and they have the mentality of, well, all right, well, it happened, but you know what? That was 3 minutes of my life of 80 years.
Right.
So, that's over with, and I'm gonna move on. And then there's some people that those 3 minutes will haunt them for 80 years because they'll allow it to. And so
I would even say, I'm sorry to interrupt right there, because they allow it to, or because it does, it lives.
Yeah.
Right? It could be just this unconscious existing of that trauma, and they want to heal. I believe everybody wants to heal, but it may be just not knowing it's possible, not knowing they can, or how.
Not taking the first step.
Yeah, it's so paralyzed so many times.
So, obviously you know my story, you know everything I went through, what I had to overcome, and I wouldn't change anything that happened in my life. All the abuse that I suffered as a kid, the time that I went away, a failed relationship, a loss of a family member, because if you changed any of that, I wouldn't be who I am today. It took every single piece of that to make me who I am today. And one of the blessings that's come out of all of it is the ability to help others and get people to relate to me that they normally wouldn't relate to.
Yeah.
So where I can go into a room and talk to someone that was molested as a child, or someone that was beat as a kid, or someone that was raped, or someone that grew up poor, or someone that was abused, or someone that was passed through homes, or is addicted to drugs, or whatever I'm talking to someone about, I can go in and I can talk to them from a first-hand perspective to get inside their head and to let them know, like, hey, look at me, I'm fine and so can you. And that gift and that ability has helped me touch and change so many lives. And no matter how successful I am from a financial standpoint or anything monetarily, that will never equal the reward that I get from when you help someone to recover their life or their confidence or their happiness. So, I'm thankful for everything that's happened to me. I use it as motivation, and it has opened so many doors for me to be able to help others, because there's been so many times I've went to talk to people and they won't listen to other people that haven't been through it, but because I've been through it, they'll listen to me. So the next question I wanted to ask you is, what is your opinion on unconventional healing treatments such as psychedelics, holistic care, etc.?
That's another really broad question that we've talked about the holistic or the wellness aspect, but when it comes then when you're with holistic treatments, and I would include acupuncture,
chiropractic
Reiki, and then I believe that if it's effective, go for it. And I also believe that there's integrative care.
Yeah.
That I've had clients who have Reiki Master, working with them also. Sound treatments with sound bars.
Yeah.
And also I've got a couple of my supervisees that I don't supervise for this, but do the CAPS treatment, the ketamine treatments. and they've been trained extensively and also get supervision for that intervention.
The mushrooms.
Yeah, well, for ketamine.
Okay.
And psilocybin, it would be the mushrooms, I believe. And again, my language I don't retain a lot of things. I always have to have it in front of me. Are showing high effectiveness for treatment of PTSD, for serious and severe depression, and there's a lot of research out there.
Seizures, a lot of different stuff. I've been reading about it too. It's pretty serious.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy how effective it is healing those things.
A good portion of the research, and we talked research earlier, a good portion of the research is really confined to a group. And so it's going to take a while before that research is generalized and out there fully across disciplines.
Okay.
And so I would say I'm no longer cautious.
Yeah.
I'm more cautious about how the treatment is administered and how individuals process it.
Gotcha.
You know, anybody can take ketamine.
Yeah.
It's also being prescribed and not worked through in mental health processing.
Gotcha.
Okay.
I see where they legalized whatever you want to call them, magic mushrooms, whatever, in I think it is Colorado and Oregon.
Okay.
But one of the things I read was that it is curing PSD, it's curing depression, and it's helping people that have seizures and fibromyalgia and issues like that, and taking care of those issues, which I guess if that can be regulated, because that is healthy, right? That's not a pharmaceutical, and I don't know, pharmaceuticals are probably pushing hard to make sure this doesn't happen, pharmaceutical companies, because they can't make money off of it right now until they add their twist to it, right? So that's a natural healer. And so I also believe that, you know, pharmaceutical companies run this country, they buy the politicians. We talked earlier off the record about how they basically pay for the clinical trials and release the information the way they want it to be viewed. So when you have that, and you have natural stuff coming out like this, of course it's going to be pushed on you like frown on that, that's not good, they're trying to use drugs. But everything that, all healers was put here on planet Earth. Like all these medications, they originally come from plants, and they originally come from stuff that's here on Earth. We just take them, we twist them, we add our stuff to them, we put a little of this. But so I'm not saying that holistic care is the answer to everything, but I'm saying that sometimes we don't need to go and run and take a pill that's going to give you 5 side effects when there might be a much more healthier and natural way to deal with the issue.
I agree with that in part, in a lot of it. I also know that any substance can be misused. You know, I think of weed, I think of marijuana and smoking. It has its benefits without question, but I also know how it can, I don't know the addictive qualities of weed, and that's disputed, but I also know how emotionally it can be connected as a coping mechanism. And I've dealt with individuals that smoke 6 blunts a day, in the afternoon, in the evening. That's a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So,
how are they functioning?
Right. So it can be misused. And so I think regulation.
Well, so can pain pills.
Well, exactly.
It's the number one epidemic in our entire country.
Absolutely.
Is the abuse of opioids.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think that there is the potential of benefit in any of the new treatments that are coming out that are not even being legalized at this point, other than in tests. And others are now legal. I think it's slow in coming. And the regulation of it will be misused potentially. You know? So, but I guess in the basic component of the question is it can have its benefit, without question.
I said to someone the other day, I think that a perfect world, it would be 33%, 33%, and 33%. And they said, what do you mean by that? I said, first 33% is preemptive care. take care of yourself. Don't abuse your body and yourself, and you won't have to deal with as many elements.
Absolutely.
So if you're eating properly, if you're exercising properly, if you're, meditating, if you're doing stuff to take care of yourself, you're going to eliminate a lot of those things to start with. So there was 33% right there. The other 33% is look at a holistic option first. Look if there's a natural remedy where you can put something in your body that's natural, that comes from the earth, that's not going to give you side effects, where you don't have to go to the hospital, maybe get misdiagnosed or something like that, where you can do something. And then the other 33% is when, you know what, well, this is a serious issue. I broke my leg, my bone is sticking out of my leg, I need to go to the hospital and get it set back in and get a cast put on and all that and everything. So I think we should break it down in thirds and look at it more like that. I think that would be a more healthy mindset for us to live our lives like that.
I think that again, in some of the components of that, I definitely agree with. I think knowing dosing is really important.
Yeah.
I think that that type of regulation can be very beneficial in mental health treatment.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's what made me ask you that question, because most of the benefits from those things that I've been reading about is from mental. It's helping the brain overcome adversity, trauma, PSD, depression. So it was very fascinating for me to hear your opinion on that.
yeah, it is still new, and yes, there's help, but also, are there things that individuals are relying on chemicals, whether it be pharmaceutical industry chemical or natural chemical, are they relying on these things for altering mood that could be
Yeah.
their own work?
Gotcha.
We talked earlier about blaming the world outside.
Yeah.
Sometimes we got to look inwardly. Is this an area? Yes, I have anxiety. Could I be regulating my anxiety differently? And I work on my biases in that. I have to make sure that I'm not biased pro or con. I just need to figure out what their hopeful outcome is.
I really appreciate your approach on that with most things in life, because I have this thing where I'll look at things three ways. I always look at opinion, fact. So I don't go back and forth with people very often. I just try to see the facts of the situation. And I'm like, there's not a whole lot of point in going back and forth, because everyone can have opinions and we can pull in a bunch of different directions, but there are some facts.
Yeah,
So-
and also, you and I think, work on this in our conversations and the array of facts.
Mhm.
Because facts can take us logically into an outcome,
Mhm.
but the totality of facts have many outcomes,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And so that's the work of that, yeah.
So let's see. The next question I have is going to be tied into two of the other questions that we asked before, but from the outside looking in. And what I mean by that is, well, here goes the question. How can we as individuals help friends and family members or people we know that are going through a mental health crisis?
How, as family members, can we help others that are going through them?
Yeah, whether they're friends or family, or if we know people that are going through a mental health crisis, how can we help them go through that?
Oh, that is a tough one. My mind just kind of freezes in all the options of answers, because I think support in so many different ways is important. It depends upon the symptoms, the severity of the symptoms, and the cause of. If I am a cause of symptoms, if the relationship with me is not a healthy relationship, I may need to distance myself.
Yes.
If the severity of symptoms is so much that the individual does not have sense about their own well-being, that's when an intervention may be necessary, whether it be addiction or mental break in psychosis. How do we help get them the help they need? Because I can't do it. So knowing our role with our loved ones, knowing the goal in it, knowing our own limits, what we can do and what we cannot do, knowing what the individual is seeking, if they're even seeking it. Are we taking on their problem? If we are taking on their problem, is it something that's going to be acceptable to them? So knowing our own boundaries in it, taking care of ourselves first, and then seeing what we can do to help our loved one.
One thing I like to touch on for anybody that's listening or watching is I like to say this, and I've touched on this a few times before. If you are a man out there and you are watching and you're listening to this, too many times as men, we tend to tear each other down and not help each other when we are in need. That doesn't make you a strong man, that makes you a weak man. A real man, a strong man, is willing to reach a hand out and help a brother. You should pay attention to people around you, family members, friends, co-workers, and if you see another man out there struggling, give him that hand. Check on him, ask him how he's doing. Anything helps. Be a good human being. And I'm saying this from a man's perspective to men because it is a major issue with men. Women tend to do a better job with that type of stuff. But ladies, I'm talking to you too. If you're watching this, check on your fellow ladies and check on your fellow men. And men, check on your fellow ladies. But men, I'm specifically talking to you. We have to do a better job. United we stand, divided we fall. And everyone is not your enemy. We have to help each other and we have to have each other's back. And that's how we will get through issues like this and all other issues.
And you're describing the emotional intelligence. It is such a threat to many people, is that if I show my weakness, believing that softer emotions are weakness, it feels so threatening to the masculinity. I was concentrating on the way I'm sitting and realizing, okay, yeah, I'm sitting the way a lot of guys would never sit, with legs crossed. If we want to truly grow, if we want to grow relationships, it's going to take a sense of understanding ourselves, understanding our experiences emotionally, mentally, physically, and not being threatened by the emotions of other people. That's where I think a lot of well, it's in my mind, I'll put it out there, the gay bashing and things along that line are the threat of the feminine in us. We all have masculine and feminine in us. Whether we want to acknowledge that or not, that's the issue, right?
I'm glad you said that. I literally said this to someone recently. I said, I don't understand someone judging someone for what they do in the privacy of their bedroom. And what I mean by that is if a man and a woman were to come up to me right now and start talking to me, and I'm speaking to this couple, I'm not thinking about what they do in their bedroom. It's none of my business. So if two men come up to me and they start talking to me, why would I start thinking about what they're doing in the bedroom? It's none of my business either. Yeah. Neither one is my business. That's their personal business.
And if there's something there that creates a discomfort and emotional discomfort, then look at self. What about this for me is uncomfortable? And as you put the challenge out to men and women, I would also say not just men and supporting and upholding men. I would also say men, when you are at home with your significant other that is female, are you emotionally connected and aware of her experiencing? I work with couples quite a lot, and I know you've had recent podcasts with looking at couples.
Yeah.
And the power in the couple and men being emotionally connected is really important. It lends to being empathic, being holding empathy toward other people. It's on an intimate one-on-one level, but as we've talked the whole time through is, can we be empathic for other people that are very different from us? And so I think the mental health and the emotional health of the male or whoever is really critical. If I feel threatened, it's why am I feeling threatened? What about this is threatening to me? That's personal work, especially when there's no threat.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's about fear of loss of control.
People, we just have to do better. We have to acknowledge our strengths and our weaknesses, our pitfalls, the things that make us great, the things that set us backwards, and we have to self-reflect. I have this thing I call soul searching, where I look in the mirror and I look within myself and I ask myself if I'm happy with where I'm at and everything in life, and not look in the mirror like, okay, does my hair look good? Does my shirt look good? No, like looking at myself and asking myself, like, are you a good father? Are you a good husband? Are you a good businessman? Are you a good friend? Are you a good person? Are you a good coach? And being honest with yourself, and when areas are slacking or lacking, you have to step up and fix those areas. And don't think just because you're doing good in one area, you can't fine tune that and do better. So just be mindful about every aspect of your life. And thank you for touching on that and answering that question. So I have one more question for you today. And it is, why do we treat the body and the mind differently? So last week I had Trey on and we did an interview, and he admitted as a man that he had been going to therapy and that helped him. And I thanked him for doing that, because I said, what I don't understand is why, if we have trauma, if I break my arm today, I'm going to go to the doctor and I'm going to get it fixed because I need to be the best version of myself. I had trauma happen to my arm. If I'm in a car wreck and my brother dies in the car with me, I had trauma to my brain. I was in a car wreck and watched my brother die. So I had trauma to my brain. Why wouldn't I go to a psychiatrist and get that fixed? Because just like I had to get this physical part, now I need to get this mental part fixed. Why do we treat them different? And why do we neglect the mind part so much?
Great question. And obviously with the wellness model, we can't separate them out, but so often we ignore that emotional well-being. And this pandemic has taught me that I have to be prepared for a pandemic. You know,
we all better be
as
now.
a professional, I have to be prepared for a pandemic, and I've been saying that in front of classes. There are so many things that go through my mind on that question. Is I believe that those individuals who are growing in all areas. And if we are ignoring one part or the other, it will negatively impact us. I teach neuroplasticity. I teach about our brain always being able to create new pathways and learn and grow all the way through life. Our body doesn't always do that. We have to compensate, right?
Yeah.
Our brains, we have to compensate in some ways because we have loss of cognition and cognitive process. But I believe that the brain is the one thing, and the emotional component of ourselves is so critical, because as we age and as we become old and oldest of old, our brain is what we have for most. And how do we keep it functioning as well as we can?
Because that's what's going to hold us. Because
And
our body will start to give out
mobility,
eventually.
right? And also our social network starts to narrow,
Yeah.
right? And our brain is what's going to continue, and our emotional self is what's going to continue helping us connect to other people as long as we can. You know, because I know that there are many people who do not have the mental capacity, the cognitive capacity at the end of life. But I'm at this place, I don't know how old I am today. 58 is where I'm at today. At this point in my life, I'm trying to start to think about what legacy, you know? important relationships.
Well, you have one hell of a legacy, let me say that.
Well, I appreciate that. I want a lot more. You know, I've got a lot of life to live, and I have to manage my fullness of self. Yeah.
So, on the first part of the question, digging a little
Mhm.
bit, why do we neglect getting the brain treated so much? Whereas we will go get the body treated just like that.
I can act as if nothing's wrong, right? If I go to somebody and start to find weaknesses or admit to weaknesses, what does that mean? I often look at spirituality, having a former career in the church. If we have a belief set that is made of bricks with no mortar, and it's not permanent. If we pull one brick out, if we change a belief, or if we find a weakness in ourselves and pull that brick out, that we're afraid of that wall falling. And if we admit weakness of some kind, we believe we are no longer protected, that we are vulnerable, we are exposed. I am either less masculine, or let's put it back into control. I am less in control.
Yeah.
But what people don't understand is the bricks are all still there. We get to design then the wall the way we want it to be. And that's the same way with mental health, is understanding ourselves is one of the most powerful gifts to self and to the people around us.
Get to know yourself.
There you go. And yeah, our emotional selves. I am a very, very transparent individual in front of crowds and in front of classrooms. I get knocked on it about 2 or 3 students every semester because they don't understand the power of vulnerability.
It's probably because they're wound too tight and don't want to lose any time, don't want to let any control go.
And we get placed on pedestals that it really wipes the pedestal out.
Yeah.
You know, if I'm seen as a human being that struggles, that is really disarming to some people.
Yeah, and it reminds me of something that I tell people all the time when they say certain things to me, and I say, I am a flawed man that has worked my butt off to become as little as flawed as possible.
Yeah.
But I'm always still going to be a flawed man.
Well, and you know, you have shared a couple times the phrase of getting over it, and I know what you mean by that.
Mm-hmm.
But you never do you? It's you keep, when you find that, oh, yeah, it's still there, whatever that it is,
Yeah.
you work to the next place.
Well, the one thing that's been beautiful about my growth is that the childhood trauma and all the things that happened to me earlier in life, they're not issues for me anymore, right? Even like when I tried to think about one the other day, I couldn't even really think of any memories of it. And then when I finally did, there was zero emotion of it, which is good. You know, it took a long time to get there. But so the things that I focus on more now, like, am I being a good enough father? Am I being a good enough businessman? Am I being a good enough husband? Am I doing the things I should be? Am I coaching right? Like, what's my legacy going to be? Where are you at with these things? Are you progressing every day to becoming a better person? So that's where mine's at every day, and I hope that other people, whether it's dealing with the traumas from the past or becoming better at everything in life, I hope that they stay on point and think about those things too and challenge themselves, because like you said, getting to know yourself.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. You stop blaming the world.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not the world's fault. You know, life is tough. So I said this to someone the other day. To me, life is like this. Life is like a roller coaster ride, because it's going to come a time when it's time for you to get on. You're going to be born. So there's going to be moments when you're going straight. There's going to be moments when you're going up. There's moments when you're coming down. There's going to be moments when you're going around. There's going to be moments when you're slowing down. Moments when you're going fast. And then one day it's going to come to a stop, and you're going to have to get off. So someone else that's kind of how life is, man. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that happen to us along the way.
Yeah.
And understanding ourselves in all that, and at the end, just okay. And what else do I need to do?
Man, it's been a real honor and pleasure to have you on. We touched on some really good things today. I would love to have you back on again sometime so we can touch on more subjects. It's been my privilege and honor getting to know you as a person, whether, as being friends with you or working with you or us speaking at events together or, a radio interview or podcast interview. It's always amazing talking to you, getting a chance to pick your brain and getting to know you better and to see things from your perspective, which is a beautiful and insightful perspective. I really appreciate that. I hope you guys look this man up, check him out, all the amazing stuff he has going on. Really quickly, why don't you tell them how they could get in touch with you through like website or email address or anything like that?
That's a great question. I think my website is johnnancephd.com. And you can also find me, I have an email address where it's john.nance6@gmail.com. And those are probably the two best ways to get in touch with me.
And if you're one of the people out there who's lucky enough to have heard this man speak or read something that he has written or been in one of his classrooms or dealt with him one-on-one, you should feel privileged and honored to have been around this man and get to soak up some of his knowledge. Thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate the interview and I appreciate the time you took out to come on today. This has been another episode of the Be the Best You podcast. Until next time, try until you fly.